Hello and welcome to this very special conversation. With me is Cynthia McCaffrey. She is the UNICEF representative to India. Cynthia, welcome to Northeast Live and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here and great to be in Assam.
I'm sure. So you have had an illustrious career as a United Nations official. You started way back in 1980s in the international developmental space. Tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
Well, thank you. I feel like I've been very lucky and people have taken chances on me in my career. I started with the International Rescue Committee, and that really marked and kind of started to drive my journey, where I worked in refugee camps, supporting humanitarian assistance.
Okay.
And that's the first time I saw that children in some of the more scary and difficult situations in refugee communities and refugee camps, I saw instantly that they're very resilient. So you see children, even in the hardest circumstances, picking up pieces and playing and ready to learn and to build a community. And I also saw there the accountability that we as adults have, that children are the victims and they're the innocent bystanders. And that's where I started on this career of, when you invest in a child, the resilience is so strong that the return is huge, right. But also the accountability that no matter what circumstance a little girl is born into or the background of a boy, we need to make sure that their rights are protected so that they can survive and then be able to thrive. After that, after working in the field and having mud on my boots, I had the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do after being so close to the work on the ground? But I had the opportunity to work with decision makers, and I worked at the World Bank, for example. And so having the opportunity to inform the decisions, including the types of budgets and policy decisions made. And when you think about including an investment in children in a World Bank loan, you could see the returns and the importance of working with decision makers and with governments to make sure you invest in their budget so that they invest in the social services that reach children.
Yes. Yeah.
Then I got my dream job and was able to come to UNICEF. And I've had a 20-year career, almost 20 years at UNICEF.
Yeah.
And I've had working with governments, where I worked with donor governments, and then I was able to lead the Office of Innovation, and so able to see how do you accelerate change through innovation. Sometimes it's technology, but sometimes it's just changing systems. And right before India, I've been in India a little over 2.5 years. I served leading the office in China, and 2.5 years ago had the privilege to come to India.
Yeah, so from China to India, two extremely populated countries, what is that one thing that caught your attention the minute you landed in India? And have you noticed some, a difference in approach when it comes to child right issues, stuff like that? Of course, not comparing with China, but as far as the India story goes, what do you think, what caught your attention, and what has been UNICEF in India, UNICEF's approach towards this one, because this is something very core to what UNICEF does in India, child rights, stopping child abuse.
Yes, I think a few things.
Yeah.
UNICEF has been working with the government of India for just over 75 years.
Yes.
And that's been our partnership from the beginning, is working with the government of India to help her advance children's rights. And I think that's what's important, is it has been a partnership really building on the commitment of the government of what are the schemes, the systems, the sustained policies that will help India make sure that the right of every child is advanced and achieved. And that's been a privilege for UNICEF to be able to be here working and learning in that context. India is UNICEF's largest non-emergency program. So it's a place over these years where we've been able to work in such a diverse country. So one thing that I saw immediately is that you never have a cookie cutter approach in India, that you have to be responsive to the community, to the context, and that's an incredible learning opportunity for UNICEF. And for 75 years, we've learned from and with India, and we've taken it globally, saying, well, this worked here in this context. In a different part of India, this is how it worked, and we've been able to apply that across India, but also globally. One of the first things I saw when I was overseas and working in refugee communities was the Mark series hand pump. The first thing that we would bring in was that very simple technology, which could do a borehole, not too deep, but deep enough to have immediately clean water. It was invented in India in the 1970s. UNICEF, World Health Organization, Government of India, and the private sector invented the Mark series hand pump. It's everywhere in the world, providing that clean water. So what I saw instantly was that the government of India wants to advance children's rights. They want to build the systems. We can work across sectors, private sector, like the Mark series hand pump, and we can try it in all kinds of contexts in India and learn from and with each other.
In India, what is your primary concern when it comes to childcare and children? Is it the children's healthcare facilities here? Is it education, or is it child abuse?
So the whole child is one of the things that UNICEF is always advocating, that it's extremely important that a child is born healthy so that that child can survive. But we don't want the child just to be healthy and nutritious. We then want to make sure the child has access to quality learning so that she can grow and have the opportunity to thrive and take advantage of opportunities. One of the very impressive and exciting things about India, and a word that in UNICEF we talk about cross-cutting, cross-sectoral, but in India I learned the word of convergence. And that's something that we do here in India, which is that convergence around the whole child. And so it's all of it. It's making sure that the mother is healthy so that the child is born at full term, so that the child is born not low birth weight, and then the mother can feed the child, exclusively breastfeed for 6 months with ease, but then make sure the child has that access to early learning and being ready to be school ready. And those things then lead to a protective environment. If a child is healthy, nutritious, is able to learn, be in a safe place for learning in school, that creates a real reduction in anything in terms of health indicators go up, abuse indicators go down, things like child marriage reduce because a child's in school. And then when she gets married, when she's ready to be married.
Right, right. So what are some of the specific initiatives that UNICEF India has undertaken to combat child marriage and also put an end to violence against children?
So I think I would pick up on convergence again, and one of the key things is looking at a child from the beginning of life. So making sure that that child is born and is healthy, and working with the government of India to strengthen and make sure that things like Angawadi centers, that you've got that, as we call the triple A's, the Angawadi worker, the ASHA, the auxiliary nurse midwife, that system is strong and complementary. And I saw this actually, I've seen it across India, and I've seen it in Assam as well recently, which is those three workers together. I've seen them working with pregnant mothers, explaining the importance of their nutrition, the value of having a birth in an institution so that if there are complications that they can be addressed quickly. But the Angawadi centers also have children up to the age of 3 that are getting them school ready. So I've seen here in Assam as well, starting to teach children language and bringing them in to learn in their mother tongue, and then they can transition to different languages. So that early learning, and so we've been working with the government of India with the introduction of the ICDS, which is 50 years old this year. That frontline workforce that's in the community, knows the community, is trusted by the community, and UNICEF works with them to make sure that they've got the most up-to-date information, training, and outreach. And frankly, it's a model that we've used globally, this frontline workforce.
Okay, all right. So you've just come back from the tea gardens of Assam. How was it? Your first time in the tea gardens?
My first time to see a tea garden.
Yeah.
And how exciting that it's 200 years of tea in Assam.
Yes.
And so it is a beautiful setting in terms of seeing these incredible tea estates with different teas and the growing. And then it was a very powerful microcosm to see how the government of Assam is coming together to strengthen the systems and access to schemes alongside the tea estates. So it's alongside the private sector, which has a very important role in looking at the types of principles they have in their businesses. And then working with the communities themselves.
Yeah, and in fact, UNICEF India has been working in the tea gardens of Assam for almost a decade now.
We've been over a decade, just less than 2 decades. We've been working in the tea estates. So when we started with a handful of tea estates in order to create proof of concept and to build models with the tea estates.
So how did it all start, and why did UNICEF India, think of coming into the tea gardens of Assam, starting what they are doing now, and how has all of it changed the lives of people there in the tea gardens?
So we came just over a decade ago, working with the tea estates to look at primarily the issue of the whole child's health, including child protection, because there was a high rate of child marriage in the tea estates. And so looking at that issue of how do we make sure that there is a healthy child who then has opportunities to thrive. And that's where we really worked with the tea estates to build this convergent model, which is healthy start to life, and at the same time, getting girls particularly in school and helping them stay in school. What I think it's done today, what I saw, which is over 10 years later, is all three coming together. The government, the state government, the tea estates, making continued investments. What we at UNICEF globally advocate for is child rights business principles. So we are now working, we started with just around 30 tea estates. Now we're working with 205 tea estates. And we want to build models to expand to the rest, which is about 800. But build those models that can scale. And that's where we worked with those tea estates to sign on to child rights business principles, which builds and invests in systems for healthcare, nutrition, child protection, education, access to education. What I also saw was the communities themselves. So we met with an adolescent group, and they exist on every tea estate, where adolescent boys and girls come together and they share information, they share things that are scary to them, things that they don't know where else to talk about it, but when you talk with your peers, it may be safer. And so that's where I saw this coming together of these 3 legs of the stool.
Cynthia, you in Assam from Delhi must be breathing some fresh air here, and you also have been to the tea gardens of Assam, a lot of greenery all around you. So how worried are you about climate change? It is already really real for all of us here. What about the impact of climate change, and how worried are you as far as the impact of climate change on children is concerned?
Well, UNICEF, and thank you for that question, because it's such a large issue for all of us. And UNICEF is quite concerned about the impact of climate on children. One of the things that I saw when I was visiting the tea estates in Assam and having the opportunity to speak with officials across Assam is that one of the key things for UNICEF is to put a child lens on that disaster risk reduction planning. So one of the key issues is, as states are planning their disaster risk reduction, is to make sure you think of children who will get hit very quickly. I can talk more about that, but the second is to be ready. And Assam, as we know, is quite vulnerable to annual floods, and so they have a very strong disaster risk reduction planning process. It's one that UNICEF is really looking at, learning with, trying to see where we give ideas and technical assistance, but we're taking a lot away from it as well. So that planning is important. And I think the third is to be responsive to the context. So the challenges that are happening in Assam are unique to what we might plan for in different places. A child lens, and I think I would go back to that in terms of planning, is genuinely thinking about how you are ready for a child to have safe spaces when there are floods. So one of the things that I saw and heard about in the tea estates is having those child-safe spaces when there is a flood. It is really looking at how to reduce, here in India and Assam, but globally, the climate change that interrupts learning. So when schools close, that has a significant impact on children and families. One of the things that I saw when I was in Assam is not just having that government plan of action, but really engaging communities themselves. So in one of the tea estates, we saw a very quick drill where children were preparing, responding to if there was an earthquake and what to do and where to go. They have Resilient Saturdays, which is they have drills that help them prepare for all types of emergencies and what to look for. So having children aware of what can happen, not necessarily only be afraid, but how they can respond. Similarly, as the government of Assam, what I was able to see as well is looking at the infrastructure and simple things that can be done and maintained, which is elevated water points, elevated toilets. So when there are the floods that we know come every year, there isn't that discontinuation of those services. So that type of planning, responsive to the situation, really planning and being ready, and then the third is having that child lens on it.
Right.
Work very closely with the disaster management planning, and one of the things that we have been, again, very much proud of is working with them to both see how they implement that child lens and that responsive planning, and continue to strengthen it for Assam, but also take the lessons that are being applied here across India, but also globally, because the climate change is a phenomenon that's affecting and interrupting lives and children's lives across the globe. So as we're looking at how the roadmap to responsiveness is working in Assam, India, in UNICEF, we're applying that elsewhere in India, but also globally, and taking that type of preparedness planning across the world.
So UNICEF must also be doing, you must be present in some of those sectors like health and education, maybe across other northeastern states as well?
We are. We're working in all of these sectors, and again, it's that convergence to genuinely look at how do you make sure that the health of a mother is strong and that she knows how to take care of her child, that newborn. Those first 1,000 days of a child's life are important. But we're also working to make sure that education is strong and that children have access to quality education. And I think as we're looking both across the Northeast and Assam, it's looking at making sure that a child has access to the right skills so that they can be able to be contributing members of the Northeast societies, but also Indian society.
Right, right, yes. India is projected to have the largest child and youth population at 350 million by 2050. What does it mean, and how can India build on this dividend?
I think I would say two things, is that UNICEF is extremely proud to be working in India with the largest youth and child population because of the opportunity. And just traveling around India, I do see the vibrancy of young people who are learning, eager to learn, contributing, whether they're seeking education and learning or entrepreneurs. When I was in the tea estate, I saw entrepreneurial young girls, I saw artists. So the youth dynamics is very strong. So it's exciting dividend. The second is you have to make an investment. So India, over the course of our working together in 75 years, has gotten more children in school. There are more girls in school in India and globally than ever before. At the same time, we're working with India to make sure that the quality of education remains and sustains, so that every child that graduates from 5th grade and goes to upper primary, every child that goes through secondary has those foundational learning skills. And I think the third is building on that, making sure the quality of that foundational learning is there, is picking up on the Prime Minister's initiatives that's looking at how do you bring in mentoring, volunteering, that builds up the skills of young people. So UNICEF, through a program that we call UVA, is working with the government, but also with the private sector, to identify the type of skills that Indian children, young people need for the 21st century. And it's working at how do you make sure that you're agile, because the world is changing so quickly, and how do you connect with jobs? Because it's one thing to have the skills, but it's another to have access to the type of networks that would enable you to get the employment. One thing I would say is that we have a platform called U-Report. And every time we have over 10 million U-Reporters around the world. Every time we do a questionnaire that says, what's the number one thing on your mind? Every time the first 1 and 2 is, how do I make sure I have that interesting job, that sustained job for the future? And it's the same in India. So I think that is a dividend India has, is that you have young people who want to be a part of the community of the future of India. And so how do we invest in that with healthy children, nutritious children, foundational skills, but also 21st century skills.
Tell me something about Meri app that UNICEF had launched in collaboration with Government of India.
So that is an exciting convergence, and where a number of things come together. Innovation and digital. It's an application that we built online that is reaching young people with information about climate and giving them knowledge about climate change, but also it's a marketplace where they can share what they've done in their communities. And it exploded, where over 26 million people have gone to this Merry Life app. That's one, is so it used digital technology and the energy of India's young people. Secondly, it was inspired by Mission Life, which is, what do you do to help create a better, cleaner environment? Can you do anything? So we really, with the government, built on that Mission Life thread of we can all do something. And I think the third thing is, it really is showing young people there's all kinds of opportunities around climate change, but it's also led to discussions around green economy, green jobs. And so I think that's something that might be the next generation of the Merry Life app, is where it can also lead to future opportunities.
Right, more jobs,
Yes,
creating jobs
exactly.
for the young people. For India, dropout rates has been a huge concern. I mean, it's not just specific to a state like Assam or any other state of Northeast. I'm sure you are very much aware of that. In fact, the statistics says that close to 90% of India's children attend primary school, but an estimated 1.5 million remain out of school or are dropouts. UNICEF India is already working with Government of India to reverse this trend. Would you please elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things for UNICEF's work globally, but also in India, is to have a strong partner in the government. So the Government of India and the Ministry of Education is an important partner of ours, has identified the importance of learning and quality learning. So the one thing that's important to remember is the strong foundation on which India is building. There are more children in school, as I said, than ever before. There are more girls in school than ever before. And building on that foundation requires that continued investment in quality education. So India is looking at how do you make sure that you have those foundational learning and numeracy skills. That means in-service training that continues for teachers, and that transition to upper primary and secondary school. So that investment that continues in the quality of the teachers. One of the other things that UNICEF is working with is how do you make sure that communities and parents themselves understand the value of education. So when a child has a good quality education and a parent sees that, that contributes to wanting the child to stay in school. I think the third thing that I would say is this issue around what do children do after school. And so making sure that when they graduate, they see that horizon of being able to see where their skills lead them, because they want to have that opportunity to genuinely contribute. And so it really continues. When people ask me, what is the one thing that you want to work on? It's much more complicated. You have to work on the whole thing all the time. And we have a partner in the government of India that's trying to say dropout rates means you have to work on the quality of the schools and learning, but you also have to work on what comes next and that skilling and what they can apply it to. And you have to work with families and communities so that they see the value of keeping a child in school and what it leads to for the child, but also for the family and for the community.
Well, finally, it's absolutely remarkable that UNICEF has been working in India for 75 plus years. Now, how would you sum up UNICEF's presence in India, and how do you look at the future?
So I think that the exciting thing about India is that it's impossible to sum it up, because it's so diverse, it's constantly changing, and it's not changing kind of on its own. It's changing because it wants to continue to do things better. So I think one of the key things that's exciting about my being in UNICEF is how do you keep up with India? And that's driven by the schemes and the initiatives the government is trying to drive to improve the lives of children and young people. It's also staying up with young people themselves and genuinely trying to respond to them. That's such an important part of being able to prepare the future. And I had the opportunity at the Decombe Tea Estate to visit a mobile ATM. And I thought, why am I going to this mobile bank ATM? And I met Salmi and Pooja, who were opening their bank accounts. Two young girls up in secondary school. And they said, we want to open a bank account because that will give us access to scholarships. And we have seen schemes that we can apply for scholarships to continue our education. We need a bank account to be engaged. So that's the type of thing that UNICEF is excited to be supporting, which is it shows the tea estates coming together, a government scheme making bank accounts accessible to young girls, but then the girls themselves being part of adolescent groups that are able to talk about access to that type of scheme. So I think that's the exciting piece. I might end with one of the things that I think sums up India is a Nelson Mandela quote, who said, you can tell the soul of a nation by the way she treats her children. And that's a lot about India, is she continues to try to figure out the schemes and the policies that will improve the lives of her children. It says a lot about the world for UNICEF. So I always say, the more we all invest for children, the better insight to our soul it shows. So.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. On that note, thank you so much for speaking to us. Thank you, and I hope you have a great stay in Guwahati.
So far, so good. So thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.